Welcome to the world of probiotic foods. This is Cultured Food Life with your host, Donna Schwenk.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to be talking about how to understand how bacteria works in the body to help with things like yeast infections and UTIs, and what's actually going on that's causing these problems and what we can do to combat them. So we know that more than half of the women will experience that burning urgency of a urinary tract infection in their lifetime. Now, men can suffer with these infections too, but the occurrence is much less frequent, and that's due to the anatomical differences between men and women. If you've experienced discomfort when you urinate, you may have an infection. And there are two types of infection that commonly affect these areas. One is a urinary tract infection, which can also be called a bladder infection, and a yeast infection. While they are different conditions, some of the symptoms, causes, and prevention and methods are similar to one another. So a bladder infection can cause a frequent urge to urinate, a burning sensation during urination, and bloody, cloudy, or a very pungent smelling urine. And while a yeast infection may include pain when urinating, you can also experience pain and itchiness in the affected areas. And a vaginal yeast infection also typically causes a thick, milky discharge. Now, UTIs are normally treated with antibiotics, but what you really need to know is that if you do take an antibiotic, you really need to replace the good bacteria that is wiped out by the antibiotics. Now, Dr. Ann Stapleton, who is a professor of medicine at the University of Washington, stated, when a UTI occurs, gut bacteria like E. coli take up residence in the vagina and displace that good bacteria that normally lives there. So a UTI can cause pain during urination and can lead to things like back pain, fever, bladder infection, and kidney infections. Now, women take antimicrobial medications to combat these infections, and the medication wipes out that bad bacteria, but it also wipes out the good bacteria too. But for some women, the bad bacteria grows back to cause another recurrent UTI. Now, probiotics help to restore the natural bacterial environment to make it hard for that bad bacteria to cause another infection. But probiotics that you get in supplements don't work very well because they often don't go to the parts of the body where they're needed. And there's so many different strains in them that you really need the specific strains that help these types of situations. And you get a much better dose of this when you eat fermented foods. Probiotic supplements just can open up the wrong parts of the body where they don't belong. They can be killed by the stomach acids. They contain way too many different strains that compete with each other. It's just not a good idea to do that. But we have a lot of other things you can do. And I've seen this myself many times. And when I was a younger woman and I hadn't found cultured foods yet, I would take an antibiotic to rid myself of a bladder infection, but I didn't replenish the good bacteria that got wiped out too. And then I would get another reinfection. And I wound up taking a lot of antibiotics. This is when I was younger. I haven't had a bladder infection, good Lord, long time. It's been, over 10 years, I haven't really had a problem with that. Once I replaced a lot of my good bacteria in my gut, those problems just went away and I didn't have the problems anymore. So if you do find yourself in a situation where you got to take an antibiotic to get rid of the infection, just make sure you get lots of probiotic foods in your diet when you're done. And this will keep out the pathogens, the parasites, the harmful bacteria, and even viruses. And there's lots of different things that it addresses: E. coli, salmonella, chlamydia, campylobacter. There's all different kinds of things that can cause a yeast infection and bladder infection. And once you have a lot of good bacteria, those things can't get a foothold anymore. One of the things I want to talk about is adding a lot of berries to your diets, such as cranberries, blueberries, and lingonberries, which is a European derivative of a cranberry. And they provide compounds called tannins. And tannins may prevent strains of bacteria from attaching to the urinary tract cell. And it will aid in reducing infections in the body overall. So eating and drinking berries on a regular basis, and especially at the onset of a UTI, may help to decrease the number of symptoms a person experiences and lessens the frequency of infection in women with recurring UTIs. So most juices contain huge amount of sugar, like cranberry juice can have a lot of sugar in it. So it's best to stick with the berries. Cranberries have what they call PAC, proanthocyanidins. They are the PACs, which are very powerful antioxidants. They remove harmful free radicals from the cells, and they have been shown the antioxidant power of 20 times higher than vitamin C and 50 times higher than vitamin E. They give this berry superpowers. The packs in cranberries have a special structure called A-type linkages, and this special structure of PACs in cranberries act as a barrier to harmful bacteria that may latch onto the urinary tract lining. Now, WebMD reports that if you drink unsweetened cranberry juice within 8 hours, the level of bad bacteria in the urinary tract decrease. And that's the unsweetened kind of cranberry juice. Thus, cranberry juice could also prevent an infection. Now, raw blueberries and blueberry juice are rich sources of vitamin C, and they also have those packs in them too. And they can also help flush out bad bacteria from the urinary tract. And it's really powerful. I've actually done this, and it actually worked very well. In a new study in the Journal of Biological Chemistry, scientists found that when we eat certain foods, such as cranberry and blueberries, our body breaks them down into those small molecules during the process of digestion. This can influence how well E. coli, the most common form of UTIs, cannot grow in our urinary tracts. We didn't set out to link diet to urinary tract infections at all, said the study's author, Jeffrey Henderson, MD, PhD, assistant professor of medicine and molecular microbiology at the Washington University of Medicine. He said, "We were looking at an immune response and how the body naturally fights infection. Their findings was a surprise. Your body makes a protein called cytokinin that is known to control bacterial growth, and it shows up in the urine of people with UTIs. It's like the body's first responder," Henderson explains. They found large differences in people's ability to fight infection. Some exhibited greater bacterial fighting power, and certain foods they were eating helped these cytokinins do its job, which is to deprive bacteria of iron, a mineral that it needs to grow. This particular cytokinin uses this dietary compounds as a molecule grip to bind to iron and keep it away from the bacteria. If you keep iron away from the bacteria, you prevent it from growing. Blueberries, cranberries, and tea, along with fermented milk products, top the list of foods that can help you produce these bacteria-busting compounds. Yeast infections occur when too much of a fungus known as Candida builds up and gets out of control. Now, in women, bacteria normally colonizes the vagina and keeps Candida and yeast infections under control. That's what the body naturally does. And there are 5 known vaginal bacteria, and many of them, such as lactobacillus, produce lactic acid, which lowers the pH, creating a hostile environment for pathogens. And what's interesting is when you make cultured vegetables and milk kefir, that's what happens in the ferments itself. It produces lactic acid, which lowers the pH and won't let pathogens grow and multiply. And it does the same thing in your body. When those bacteria are killed by things like antibiotics, a big void or empty space is there now in your body. And so Candida sees that and has room to spread out and grow. And overgrowth of yeast may result leading to a yeast infection. Now, we're looking for balance and not complete extinction of Candida. It seems that everybody just wants to kill it and get rid of it. And everybody seems to think the same thing. We just have to get rid of it. You really want small amounts of Candida in your body because it helps you to digest things like heavy metals that your regular digestion cannot handle. And so you want small amounts of it. You just don't want it to grow and multiply. And it's kind of like the same story. You want the good bacteria to keep the Candida and the harmful bacteria at bay. And the more good bacteria you have, the less places that Candida can grow and multiply, and the less places that bad bacteria can get a foothold. Studies have shown that when you add probiotics from the lactobacillus family, which is in almost so many of our cultures, you downregulate Candida, stopping yeast infections and keeping them from reoccurring. And I can think of no better way to do that than with cultured foods. It comes as no surprise to me that bacteria organizes communities of bacterial responses to help fight pathogens. It does this by depending on what you eat, especially the strength of your microflora, how much good bacteria you have. And kefir has more good bacteria than any of the other cultured foods. It is a powerful ally in preventing and combating UTIs and yeast infections. I make kefir smoothies all the time. Actually, I made one this morning with blueberries and strawberries, and I think I had a little kale in there. And I put cranberries in there. I love that. And I'll make a smoothie out of it. And it makes a very powerful smoothie that helps to make your good bacteria grow and multiply. And the cool thing is that blueberries and cranberries can flood your body with all these components it needs to help stop UTIs and yeast infections. So it's a very powerful way to start your day with a blueberry or cranberry smoothie and really flood your body with all kinds of extra help if you need it. Now, kefir, that one study found that milk kefir that has 50 plus probiotics, and you can do it with non-dairy too. We've got like 16 or 17 non-dairy kefir recipes, but it was very impressive at inhibiting Candida and other harmful bacteria too. The interesting study added kefir to a sugar broth, which was like molasses and brown sugar, and it still inhibited bad bacterial growth as well as Candida. It kept it at bay, the kefir did, and it put a lot of stuff in there to try to combat it. Several strains of bad bacteria, such as Salmonella and E. coli, were added, and in kefir inhibited all of them. So it was a pretty impressive study, and I'm linking all my research and my references because when I do a podcast, I have an article, and I have all the research on here. So basically, they were trying to create a yeast overgrowth, and they were using sugar to do it because Candida loves sugar. And because the kefir was in there, it inhibited all of it. So it's very powerful in the body as well. Kombucha, that's another one I want to talk about. A lot of people avoid cultured foods, especially kombucha, when they're having an overgrowth of Candida, believing that these foods actually make the condition worse. Now, Saccharomyces boulardii, a probiotic yeast, is abundant in kombucha. It's also abundant in our kefir soda starter, and it has an effective ability to displace harmful yeast such as Candida. S. boulardii is absent from your natural gut since it's a transient yeast that passes through the intestines after ingestion. If taken every day, it achieves a steady stream in the colon, and within 3 days, it is clear from the stools, and 2 to 5 days later. It does not attach to the mucosal cell linings, but works its magic on you as it moves through your gastrointestinal tract. When S. boulardii is present, it inhibits toxins from binding to intestinal receptors and steals the metabolites they need to survive. So it takes their food, basically. Thus, many pathogens pass out of the body, unable to survive in the powerful presence of this probiotic. They even found that other pathogenic strains like E. coli, Salmonella, they attach themselves to the S. boulardii, thus preventing them from attaching to the mucosal lining, and then they were removed from the body when S. boulardii came out of the stools a couple days later. So basically, here's how it works. It's kind of cool. Things like E. coli and Salmonella think that S. boulardii is a friend, not a foe. So it goes and attaches itself to it. S. boulardii pretends to be its friend, but steals all of its food. They can't get loose of it. And then when S. boulardii leaves the body, it takes those pathogens with it. And since it's a transient bacteria, they don't stay very long. So in the case of kombucha, it's important to drink the first fermented kombucha, not the second one that has lots of fruit juices, just to make sure all the sugars are gone and properly fermented. Cultured foods can really aid in the treatment of Candida overgrowth as long as they are made properly in order to remove the sugars and allow the probiotics to grow and become very, very strong. Now, another one is fermented veggies. Sauerkraut is another fermented food that researchers found that inhibit Candida, and it also has antibacterial activity too. Fermented kraut juice was observed to be very effective against E. coli and Salmonella, Streptococcus, and Bacillus, I don't know how to say that, liquefaciens. It was shown to have an antibiotic and antifungal activity against a wide range of bacteria and fungi. And it was concluded that the antifungal activities of sauerkraut juice is comparatively better than commercial antibiotics. Further research is being done to find treatments for a variety of pathogens that cause people to be sick. Now, another new one on the market is Algasarai yogurt. This is a very important microbe that already lives in the genital, urinary, and digestive systems of the body. It has a very special ability to live in the upper gastro area, similar to another yogurt called L. reuteri. And they have these believed to offer specific health benefits that include things like SIBO and other preventions of bacterial vaginosis and peptic ulcers, as well as controlling ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease, and irritable bowel disease, or IBS. L-gaceri is very important for all of those things. And it's very important for female health because it naturally abides there and should be crowding out a lot of the harmful bacteria. We have a special L-gaceri yogurt that we just started selling last year, which is one of the most effective ways to get more L-gaceri in your body. And it begins to crowd out pathogens and harmful bacteria, and it's very delicious. We also have another yogurt that is called L. reuteri yogurt, which is creating quite a buzz. People are loving this yogurt. It does so many things. And I have since making Kefir for decades ago, L. reuteri does something different that Kefir doesn't. It colonizes the upper gastro area, not the colon. And I have really seen its effects on Candida. Since Candida can live in different parts of the body, I've seen it can live in the sinuses. And I have really seen L. reuteri be very effective in clearing out any kind of those sinus problems. My youngest daughter had a lot of trouble with her nose. She was always stuffy. And when she started taking L. reuteri, it went away. And she'd had it for years and years and years. And the only thing she had done different was the L. reuteri. And that really changed the game for her. And it's very effective. Now, I think some of it might have been Candida living up there. I'm not sure. But whatever it did, it worked. And so it has a lot of antifungal properties. And it works against 5 of the 6 most common oral Candida species. It eliminates these species and is now being studied for the treatment of small intestinal fungal overgrowth, or SIFO. And that is characterized by the presence of excessive numbers of fungal organisms, and like Candida, in the small intestines that is associated with GI symptoms. And it works very effectively. I can't say enough about it. Both of those yogurts are relatively new. And they work very, very well. And they're very effective. People are really, really seeing some miraculous results with them. Now, one thing I want to note, that when you first start consuming cultured foods, you may start to get something like a yeast infection that it's a die-off symptom. They call it a healing crisis because you're flooding your body with good bacteria, and then the pathogens start to die. And for instance, Candida can give off 80 toxins when it dies. The medical term for this is a Herkimer reaction, and the cells release the toxin into the circulation. The body's not able to eliminate them quickly enough, so they start to leave the body. They can kind of even mimic a little bit of a yeast infection. You think you're getting worse, but if it happens right as you're starting to do this, you know you're actually eliminating some of those harmful Candida species and also pathogens that can make you feel a little worse before you get better. And I have an article on a healing crisis. But okay, so let's go over this again. The things I recommend are milk kefir or the non-dairy milk kefir. Kombucha, you can buy or make your own. It's better to make it. It's stronger and you don't have as much sweeteners in them. Some of the people are making it aren't really, they're what do they call it? Flash pasteurization. So you're killing a lot of the good bacteria so it won't overflow and store shelves. GT Synergy Kombucha does not do that. It's a good one to get, or you can make your own. Cultured vegetables are super easy to make. You just can make a jar. Even any of these, you don't have to do all of them. Just one of these is going to help you. L-gaceri yogurt is very powerful, and L. reuteri yogurt is very, very powerful. So even if you just try one of these, it's going to make a really big difference in your life. And I really, really recommend you start eating more blueberries and more cranberries because they have a powerful effect on the body, not just on UTIs and yeast infections. They also help the heart. They help to keep you healthy. They supply you with much needed, huge amounts of red phenols that really just keep you young, feed your good bacteria, feed the phytobacteria, keep your gut very, very healthy. So I highly recommend that. So those are just some things that you can do. I have all of the information on the article, and I'll link that in the descriptions below that you can go and look at the article, and I have little boxes where you can see each one, see which one you want to try. Do the one that most interests you. And just start adding, even if you don't do any of the probiotics, start doing the blueberries and the cranberries because they can have a powerful effect on your body. So thanks for listening, guys. And let's tune in next week and we'll be talking more about different ways that the body can heal with food and cultured foods and probiotic foods and just different things that can help make you healthier and happier and live a longer and younger feeling life. Thanks again, guys. Have a good week.